how to write a mod, how to phrase a mod, how to not be like an asshole online.
No, yeah, but
Uh,
it's different. What I
but
was
that's
trying.
just not you. I think you're talking about something different,
Yeah, it's not
right?
how you behave on the modding discussions, but like how do you expect players to
What you expect to engage with in a mod post or what?
in like how do you expect to engage in mod posts, the things that modders should be trying to look out for on maps, and other unwritten expectations that the community has grown to be used to, but new modders are struggling to find out by themselves because there's no document right now
Yeah,
that
and just reading
details.
the ranking criteria is not helpful in that case either, because it's like
Yeah,
describing what not broken map looks like, but not how to like actually write all of that down.
yeah. So that's why I was like pointing out those three articles, because even though they relate to how to mod in certain ways, they don't really tackle the main point of modding, which is what should modding really do, what you should be focusing as a modder in the community, stuff like that. Like a certain set of expectations for modders to have a certain guidance to know what to look out for on maps that you're modding. Not really. The only thing, no, the only thing that we really have to do is go over the articles which have mentions of like any modding related and how to mod, and just like either delete them from those articles and move them to the general article, or just know how to manage it on the wiki side of things. That's the only thing that we have to do.
And I'd expect like that we could just repurpose the first article link, like the general modding article, for that, and just actually make it an actual guide instead of like the how to mod section just being like, okay, where do I like how do I copy and paste the issue and like what to describe or whatever, like to actually fill that one with content.
I was going to bring that up. Ideally, there should be the general set of expectations that all modes should uphold, and then the different modes should have their own guides. For example, Mania has its own guide, even though it's quite old by now. It still serves as a good introduction of what should users be looking out for when modding maps. So having those like game mode nuances on their own articles would be extremely beneficial for those who want to just like know the intricacies of each game mode. Yeah, no, it's just wiki work. It's just managing how to organize things so everyone can participate. I can help with it. I already had some stuff like saved and bookmarked for it.
Yeah, we do have one request. Okay, hello, Connor.
Hi. I guess the biggest question I had is how strictly would you guys want this to be followed? I think that modding in and of itself can be really subjective, and a lot of other people can approach things in their own way. And I guess that's the only thing that really strikes out to me is if we do start to get a bit restrictive in terms of how mods should be had, I think that might steer people off a little
I
bit.
think like that's just my opinion, but I think that right now we have kind of nothing. So like any sort of like guidance for someone who is completely new would be helpful. I don't think at least I don't think I would enforce an article like that.
Rather than it
Okay.
being a set of rules, because the community rules already cover like misbehavior and things. Rather than the modding guides being rules or anything, it's just you have something to start with, so you know you have a better idea of what you can be doing to help maps out that you like or that you feel like you can improve on.
Yeah, you should
Okay.
approach this as like guidance, not like a set of rules that we are going to start upholding.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
Any other questions, or should we move on from this? It seems pretty clear cut. That is a generally good idea to do. I think I'll take the silence as we can move on then. So the next thing was a suggestion from suggested by a BN privately to us. It was when NAT resigned but still having the ability to evaluate. I think this was brought up due to the concerns of like we had a good handful of NAT resign in like the recent weeks. due to issues happening. And we're just wondering whether we should go through with this. There was some talk in some private channels which seems to suggest that if they wanted to continue evaluating, they should just stay as an NAT.
I think I added that comment to it, but it's gone now.
It's in the private version of the document, but yeah, it's there.
Oh, yeah, okay, that makes sense.
I mean, like, besides the fact that the majority of NATs that resign, it's either because they don't want to be involved in all, or they're just sick of doing evaluations to begin with. If this was ever the case that VNs would want to do this regularly, which I don't know if that would be anytime soon, just because that is what you do as an NAT. There would have to be like a clear way to show that, because when you apply, you know who the NAT are if you check. You have a general idea that you'll be checked on by some of these people, but if unlabeled beatmap nominators are included in that, you have no idea. There's no visibility. You'll be evaluated by somebody that you had no idea was even doing that. And it just makes it harder to ask for feedback ahead of time. You don't have clear expectations of what you're getting into. And if we did label them separately, then why aren't they just an AT?
To me, this just feels like NAT without the moderation firms, which is something that we commented on another discussion. I just don't really find the point of it, besides what you commented of users having a set expectation on like being evaluated by the nomination assessment team. So what was I'm not trying to be like harsh with what I'm about to ask. I just don't really understand why was this brought up. Like, what problem was it trying to solve?
I think the concern was probably brought up because we were having a huge turnover of NATs and we just wanted hands on board to help with evaluations, but I also agree that it's not really necessary.
I see.
I also think that the reason why BN evaluators have a lot of like enthusiasm when we bring them on board is because it's a temporary kind of thing. We don't have them on all the time, and that helps keep the motivation going. That's because of doing it if you're not doing it like every single time. So it's a bit more. It's better when it's more exclusive that way, in my opinion. I don't know if there's anyone in here who thinks this should be a good idea, if they have any opinions.
I don't know, it feels like an unnecessary layer of complexity, to be honest, in the current context of our system.
Like, if we desperately needed for being evaluators on evaluators in general, if we needed those on a certain case in which everyone just resigns hypothetically, I think it would be far simpler to use like being an evaluator, like a formal one, being an evaluator around, and just go on with that rather than having any team members like stepping down into being evaluators themselves. It doesn't really it doesn't seem like the pipeline to follow, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yeah, I agree. It's also kind of what happened with the most recent mass resignation. We happened to have another being evaluators round ongoing, which helped us ease off the work and not completely crash, basically.
And I think that kind of solution would tie into just being readily able to bring on BN evaluators on board, because at least when we add them, it's announced in several places. Maybe it could be in a few more. And so that helps with the transparency thing, at least.
So at the moment, when we bring on BN evaluators, we announce it on the BN side, which is then copied over to the BN server announcements channel. That's how we tell people. That's how we do our transparency check of letting people know these people are doing evaluations. Is there anything else we need to do for that, or do you think that's fine as we are with letting people know who are actually doing evaluations?
maybe in the future it could also be on the application page, like these are the current people evaluating. And I think it's been posted to the NAT Twitter before, but not like as a consistent thing.
Are we not? We're not actually. When we do announcements on BN side, we're not posting them on Twitter, are we? Or well, it's not automatically done at the moment.
It's not automatic.
Right, right. Doing so automatically might be a bit messy, but yeah. So I'm going to put this down as something we're probably not going to go ahead with. Are there any other comments that people want to bring up on this one before we move on? I see someone typing. No, never mind. Okay, I'll move on then, I think.
Maybe continue typing,
okay.
actually.
I'll give them 1 minute then. I think it's possible that the same NAT will evaluate and drop same mapper of applications if they have been applied applications many times. I think that would be a loss of motivation on the part of the test taker. What do you think of the NAT side? So I'm just trying to
I don't
understand
know
the
what
question.
that question means.
So if
But evaluating the same guy applying over and over is frustrating for like both parties, or
no, we're just trying to understand the question. So is this when an applicant applies several times and they're denied many times? It's a loss of motivation on the on the applicant.
I think it's that, but if they're evaluated by the same person over and over, maybe.
but that's just random. Like, okay, in smaller game modes, it's not very random if you have 3 NAT and all 3 are rolled on everything, right? But
NAT assignments are random. Sometimes it's actually preferred to have at least one person that was on previous applications because they can better judge like if you
if there's been
improve.
actual like improvement, yeah.
Because if it's someone totally new every time, they may not see that you improved or that you covered some areas in your previous app.
It's also worth pointing out that on modes with less NAT members, the chances of rolling with the same evaluators is way higher. So yeah.
Yeah, if there's 3 NAT for a game mode, and you will have the same people.
Yeah, I think the RNG aspect is probably the most fair way we can do things at the moment. Anyway, we can't. I don't think there's any plans to really change that for now, unless there's like any significant issues with it anyone can point out. But generally, yeah, we do try to. It's generally able to have someone previously evaluate someone to their most recent one as well.
I mean, regardless of assignments, we judge each application individually, like by its contents. So we aren't like just seeing like we aren't judging applicants like by who they are. We judge the contents of their application. So we look into improvement and that kind of stuff.
And the main exception would be for the better of the applicant, like when they apply and we're like, okay, you did really good on modding spreads, but you completely missed modding snaps. And then on the next app, they're like, okay, I'm gonna mod spreads a little bit less. I'm gonna map snaps a lot or something like that. And it's like on its own, it would be like, why didn't you cover this area? But if we look at the previous stuff, it's like, oh yeah, they've already showed they can do this.
Yeah, I don't think this has much to do with having NATs do evaluations at the end though. So I think we can move on from that. Mouth has a suggestion to have BN evaluators be more frequent. At the moment, we basically have them whenever we need like new prospective NATs, right? Would there be a reason to have them more frequently?
I mean, it's currently like around 4 times a year almost.
And they usually go on for like a month, right?
Yeah,
Or is it 2 months?
it's officially a month, but sometimes it goes on like a couple extra days or whatever.
We recently expanded the team like a significant amount. Like we had like 6, 7 people in like the past couple of weeks or so. Some people argue that such a big team isn't actually a good thing either. So we need to strike a balance somewhere.
Yep.
I think it might be a good idea to like have people build experience, not only when we need them, but like just in general, so that they have the experience when they're needed. Maybe as BN evaluators.
I think the way we do that right now, like if people don't make it to the team, but we give them enough feedback, that we do that way with like building experience. So
Yeah, but I'm thinking like maybe it's not a bad thing to have more cycles unless it's a massive workload on our side.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, pretty much.
Only thing I would be concerned over is just getting people's hopes up while we don't actually need anyone.
That's fair too.
But
Yeah.
could just be managed by making the expectations clear. And if people still
Yeah.
want to do it, why not?
Label it.
We could probably look in the next few months, but since given that we've just added some new NATs, I don't think we're looking to open them in the near future, at least anyway. But let's say give it a few months, and then we can think about it again if need be. The amount of evaluators to the amount of BN applications is kind of low at the moment. Is it really?
I mean, it was, but we were like, we're like, like 3 active NAT, and then the BN evaluators, and then having them as fully NAT is a little bit different in terms of being able to get through everything. And adding them to NAT doesn't just instantly make the existing backlog or trying to catch up disappear. So I think everyone's been doing a really good job of that.
It's also to keep in mind there's a little bit of a training period as well when we bring people either into BN evaluators or into the NAT to get people up to speed. I heard that a number of times taken was not very important. It seems that they were training improvement by looking at content improving them. What are the criteria to use to evaluate improvements? That's a bit of a rough one to answer because it's quite. There's a lot of subjectivity to how we kind of like judge it. We try to lay out all of our like criteria and expectations on the wiki article and on the BN site. But when it comes specifically to improvements,
I mean, normally in the feedback or in the evaluator's comments, you'll see. Well, I haven't checked everyone's evaluations and how they do it, but normally, at least for what I've seen, the feedback will contain the specific bullet points that you should try to aim to improve. But we don't have like specific guidelines or rules on how we should objectify these improvements because there's no way in hell we can like objectively know whether someone has been improving or not. We try to compare what they offered on their current application with what they offered in the past and see if there's a tangible, noticeable improvement on that. And normally, if there's not an improvement, you'll be explained why and how that could be improved. That's normally what we go by with the feedback itself.
yeah, I think we can probably move on from this for now. So we're not going to go ahead with having resigning NATs still eval because we think that if they were still to eval them, they may as well just stay in NAT.
Yeah.
Alright, so the topic next up would be BN mentorship. This was also another carryover from the previous meeting. There were some concerns because a lot of the standard NATs at least were scattering to the winds that we weren't sure about the future of the BN mentorship, but I think we're in a bit more of a stable position to have that, to be able to keep that moving forwards. Do we have Dada with us? I don't think we do we? Or Fuju? Do we?
I don't
Yeah, they're not
think
here.
so. Yeah, Oko said to wait for him. Okay, he's back. He's back. 'Cause he's the one who made
Okay.
the forum post
I
about
made
this.
I made the forum post, and to summarize it, it's basically okay. I've seen a bunch of announcements on and like a news post about it, and that there's a BN mentorship and whatever, and it usually results in UBNs joining, right? Aside from a news post, there's like no documentation on what it is, how it works, and like who can participate. And I think it's just like Dada's brainchild, and I like it's existed for 2 cycles successfully, I believe, right? So I was just wondering if like at least there should be a wiki article about it.
Technically 3.
Okay, currently 3. And well, also I think like most people that originally started it are like not really in the team anymore, but they're still running it. It's kind of weird now. I'm not sure actually.
I think we've already agreed privately that if that the people who were running before and are no longer NAT, at least officially on the website, they're free to like continue running it, right? That's just repeating.
Oh, yeah,
it.
yeah.
We're just repeating that just so it's out in the public. I do agree we could have a bit more documentation of that, especially if we're going to like continue doing these officially, and it's like an actual official alternate way to into BN. We just need someone to actually write the articles, I guess, right?
I think what was mentioned in my thread was like, okay, we gotta avoid like having the impression that signing up and getting chosen randomly for this program is like the only way you can join the BNG, because it's not.
Was that in the forum thread?
They have a forum thread. And I think we also agreed internally that we don't want to blow up the scope of this thing like too much. Because I asked the question if we want to allow that like BNs to mentor other BNs and whatnot. But I think that was met with like moderate pushback, because it would involve us vetting BNs to then make sure that they actually get other people up to speed to also be BN.
But then
Which is easier if you're like already evaluating BNs like an NAT, right?
But then we
I
have
think
the
that was
case
the
of
main reason.
yeah. But then we have the case of Dada and like Fuju and all them who used to be NAT but
But,
now
like,
are officially they're BN, but they're going to be doing the teaching, right? So that would be a BN teaching a BN, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, but they already
technically.
have
But I
like
think that's
lengthy
different.
experience.
But like I was talking about people that have not been NAT before and just like BNs teaching other BNs.
So we're
I
making a
think that was
distinction
the thing
for.
that we were not that comfortable.
So we're just going to make a distinction for ex NATs teaching BNs.
Anyone who has like experience with like evaluating BN apps.
Right.
Actually.
Okay. So anyone who's done experience with evaluations, I guess, is the way we could write it down then.
Does that also include people that were in BN evaluators before and were not added to the NAT later? Technically,
Well,
So like
because
Errol
they
or
also
what?
have, for example, yeah, or just general people we have in Taiko as well that were just not added to the NAT later, but they do have the evaluation experience.
Yeah, and I
well,
think the
why weren't
general
they added to the NET?
Oh, that's a
Well-
whole different topic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
And I think it's just trying to get to
Dada's
the
not here
point to
right now,
allow.
but
Yeah.
but I do believe he was up for rejoining the team if like this keeps running successfully or whatever. I'm not 100% certain on what he said actually.
So do we have the next cycle? Is that in the works? That is in the works currently, isn't it? That's currently being organised.
It is.
Do we have a time frame of when that's beginning? Like a public one, at least. Or is it still planning?
Not yet. We're still gathering mentors. Last time I checked, like confirming them who's gonna mentor this cycle.
Fair enough.
And once that's all set, I imagine you guys will make your news post again.
Yes, certainly.
Mhm.
So we have a point on the agenda, which
Yeah,
is
Dada
talking about-
started gathering people interested in like running the next cycle 2 weeks ago, like thereabouts.
Yep.
But I don't like. I'm not sure where it's moving right now.
Yep, and we're going to stick with just NADs and XNADs, right? We're not going to bother with BNs, at least not for this cycle, for BN mentors.
I thought that was the general opinion, but it's like up to the people actually running the project, you know.
Right, yeah. Unfortunately, they're not here to answer, so...
Yeah, with the next topic, I think it was brought up that, like, okay, it's just somewhat similar to like the community mentorship program in that sense that it's people teaching other people, and yeah, I just yeah, bringing up a badge for it is somewhat weird in my opinion, because it's like we're limiting who can participate to NATs, right? So giving ourselves a sticker for having participated in it seemed weird to me. I would be totally down to just make it the same contribution badge as like mentorship gets. That
If
was
it's
what
if
I
we
said
li-
last
yeah
time on the topic.
if we're limited to NATs and XNATs, I don't feel comfortable badging this.
Yeah, because at that point, it's just part of NAT
Yeah,
responsibilities
when
that they're taking on.
you just have the NAT like badge for like being NAT for a year already. So like the only thing that I could see working is like entering them into the same website that we use for the mentorship program to keep track of the time spent and give them that contribution badge to that program.
Yeah, we can keep track of
like
how
I
many.
wouldn't want
agree.
to take over the place. It's just that I feel like if there's any badge, then it's gonna be that one. At least from my point of view.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a high priority to give ourselves a sticker, I think.
No.
Formalizing addition procedures. Do we need a more formal procedure to add mentees to the BNG? Mock-up application, etc. So, how's it done currently? We just like, if they pass, quote unquote, pass the cycle, we just tell them to like do a very quick application just so we can like get them onto the BN site, right? There's no official application process they need to do or like a final exam or whatever, is there?
Currently, there's no formal process for that. No.
I think the last few times it was just like, okay, everyone made an application with like, and then they were internally processed as these are BN mentorship mentees and those are their mods and to not touch them or whatever. I think that's what I've seen floating around at least.
Do we need any formal procedure to add them in that case then, or is what we have just fine?
I think that would be covered if
Not-
a wiki article's written about it, just like a general. Once they finish their evaluation cycle, they will put it in their application and it'll be double checked.
So it's an actual like proper application, not just a here I have passed a thing, just add me quickly. They actually do the test, look for actual mods, and write an actual thing for it.
Well, for the last cycle at least, their application wasn't exactly the same because they're already getting evaluated throughout the cycle by their mentors. It was a little bit different, but when we finalized those details, we would just put that in the wiki article, like in terms of like formalizing or just writing out how that addition works, which I think they need to work out some of the details on because I'm not fully involved in the mentorship here.
Alright, fair enough. So we can iron that out during documentation then. Because either way, I don't think there's much we need to change anyway, if we do need to. Miscellaneous. Adding mentors is available, time zones availability from the get-go. That seems like an obvious quick win, right?
Yeah. I'll just make sure to add it in the next news post.
Alright, fair enough.
And the wiki if we have a spot for that.
Yep, so we just have to make sure documentation. So do we want to do documentation before we start next cycle? Or can we just do it whenever?
In my opinion, it would be ideal to release both the news post and the documentation at the same time, so we can give said documentation easy exposure via the news post.
So we need to probably think about getting the documentation going basically immediately, right?
Yes. If we can't make it, it's not super urgent in my opinion. But it wouldn't hurt to try regardless.
Alright, so who can we bother to write up the documentation for it then? Do we just like tell Dada we just need this?
And I can work with it with Dada.
Yeah, that sounds good then. Are there any other questions? I saw a lot of activity in the text channels. Is there anyone who wants to speak?
I got one request. Subavi. Hello.
Hello. So this is regarding the BN mentorship part. I would assume we're still at the BN mentorship, right? Yes. If I'll assume yes, then so I'm one of the graduates from the BN mentorship, and according to your meeting notes, you guys are saying that uh oh no, I think you guys were mentioning on how like evaluations are dealt, and I would like to personally ask like, is the evaluation consistent between each of the mentors? Like from what I gathered in my time of mentoring, each mentor evaluates each of their mentees differently. So for example, my mentor was Aika. Aika evaluated all of us based on the moddings we've done. From what I heard, some other mentors use a more formal process of essentially checkpoints, something like that. Is
No, what I meant
there
was like there's like no info at all, like what the process would be, and the evaluations seem to be handled differently internally. And I think if we have some sort of process for, hey, this is how you go through mentorship and that's how your app is going to be processed, we should make that information public. But I think we just didn't really have that process to begin with, and we're just like winging it on the fly. And
Yeah, from what I've noticed,
I just basically
continue.
was like, we should write down the big picture of like how this is gonna go, so people at least know what's gonna happen if they get accepted into this place.
that's
Yeah,
understandable?
because right now, like each mentor has their own procedure, and then they sanity check them with the rest of the NAT. So like that's the discussion phase that was referred to earlier.
All right. So like it would be nice for you guys to have like a general idea of how the BN mentorship works. If you guys are able to like essentially make it public, like a certain documentation, like a certain process, because from what I heard too, it's wildly inconsistent between mentors. So yeah. Moving forward, I guess it would be nice to have a standardized way of expressing the BN mentorship. I would say that's it.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, it should be smoothed out when we read the documentation. There should be some discussions about how things are done, and I'm fairly certain the mentors will come to an agreement on each of those, on all of that. Are there any other questions? I still see a lot of activity in the text chats. Hello.
Hello again. I primarily just wanted to give my opinion on something. Even if it is just NAT for the BN mentorship, I do think it still should be badged. It's clear that it happened with the intention of NATs giving the highest quality of work because they know the most by not letting BNs into that initially. And I think the work being done has it warrant a badge to begin with, even if it is restrictive to only NATs. Especially if like there is that verification that you guys are like mentoring. Like that is a difficult thing to do. And I think it does warrant a badge either way. That's all I wanted to say.
Yep, fair enough. I can understand that opinion. I still think it's a bit like Obama awarding Obama, though, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't mind it. I just find it somewhat weird. Is all.
Yeah. I think we could probably move on. I do see some other questions, but I don't think they're related to agenda topics at the moment. We can come back to those at the end if we have some time, but I want to get through the agenda points first.
Someone's asking if a mug event is going to be back at some point.
Yeah, I want to hold that for later. If
Around
that's
we
all right.
have extra time.
So the next topic we have is vetoes. There were some concerns because a few weeks back we decided to change how NATs will uphold their standards, or rather, no longer will during their evaluations. And there were some concerns about how vetoes will be handled in this case because vetoes are basically all about upholding personal standards and such. There were a few threads created on this topic. One which is just nuke vetoes altogether, another one was to increase the threshold to uphold a veto. I believe Nofi had some data just before the meeting gathered about how previous vetoes had ended up and how they would be affected by if they were to be increased, if the threshold would be increased.
Yeah, let me check. We got like 130 people in the in total in here, so I'll start the stream back up for a bit. No more exploding cats. So, the main proposals. And I mostly put the data together to be realistic about what we're affecting and who this is related to instead of it being like a vague, let's rerun every recent veto or let's redo every recent veto or however. It's like, it's about these vetoes. These would be the ones that are affected. So the main proposals was delete vetoes, which was pretty mixed response. There was increased threshold, which had a pretty positive response. So I ran a VN site vote on it and posted the results down. Where did I post them? Okay. So 69% of people that voted agreed to raise the percentage to 70% for a veto to be upheld. But the question that comes from that is, what do we do with the recent upheld vetoes that are like between 50 and 70%? So just to get this in mind, I put together this spreadsheet. It should be set to public view. If I have the permissions wrong, just yell at me. So it's organized by mode. So realistically, the 4 vetoes this affects, it only affects 4. Because everything else is either ranked or otherwise resolved. So there's the Thrush Nightingale bird singing, which was an all mode veto about the song. There was Tomatis' recent map that got vetoed, there's Spelunker, and there's Say Goodbye. All of these are recent vetoes that fall in between those thresholds. So something else I took note of when going through these, besides like summarizing everything just in one page so you don't have to click through 10 vetoes, is how many people voted. So there was a couple of proposals like, what if we give them a shortened cooldown before people can remediate them, like 3 months instead of a year? Or what if we just leave them as they are and they have to wait a full year? Or what if we just completely dismiss the vetoes as they are right now because they're less than 70%? Personally, after putting all this data together, my personal proposal would be to either reopen them or copy them to where more people can vote on it with that new amount in mind. Like they can edit their current votes, people that didn't vote can add theirs, because most of these only like 40 or 50% even participated to begin with, which on the Tomatis map was like, this seems really unfair because hardly anyone voted and it was a difference of like literally 1. At least that's my current thoughts right now. Just reopen those, let them rerun, let other people vote, and whatever is that result is the final one, instead of worrying about like this remediation or anything like that.
Yeah, I also do really like the idea of just reopening them and keeping the current votes and then allowing people to either append or add new ones in. That seems like a very...
If I'm reading this correctly, it's gonna be 3 maps because one of them is ranked now? Or... If
4.
I'm reading this correctly, it's just 3 maps, right?
Yeah, I noted them here. So Tomatis's set of the song with the artist Sakuragawa Megu, Spelunker, Say Goodbye, and then Nightingale Bird Singing. Which Nightingale Bird Singing had the majority of the assigned mediators vote for it, but it wasn't open to everybody in the affected modes yet at the time. So I think that one could also be reopened. And Tycho is chilling. There's been no vetoes. Good job, Tycho. Everything else was either dismissed at some point or resolved.
I didn't see the all modes tab. That's why I got confused. I see. And I think there was a separate idea with like waiting until a certain threshold of OBN actually has voted. Right?
Yeah, that was discussed a little bit. I don't believe there was a thread made about it. Let's double check. Yeah, there wasn't a specific thread about it. I believe that some people brought it up in one of the other veto threads of having a minimum % of participants for it to even be finished.
It's like
I
the
think that
content
was
review
some
thing where
DNAT
it's like,
plan,
we need
actually.
20 votes or whatever for them to close, right?
Yeah.
Similar idea. To not just be like, okay, it's been open for 7 days, so now it's run its course and now it closes and whatever is the result, even though only 30 people voted out of like 150 or whatever.
Right, so should we look to get a thread open for minimum number of voters then? And then see what sort of numbers we want for that? Or we can decide here, alternatively.
I mean, the content review already asks moderators and BNs for a certain minimum participation in order for the vote to count as allowed or disallowed. I think it would be a good idea to implement personally.
I
but
think one of the
it's
points
right
was
now.
just, do we allow people that do not provide any reasoning whatsoever to actually have their vote count? And I think the public opinion was no, they should provide reasoning. But that also kind of screws over the like participation of like anyone who can't be bothered to actually write an in-depth comment.
And if the only reasoning you're required to put is agree, it's kind of pointless. But there is definitely an existing concern of validating if people actually check the map, which is very hard to do if you just throw a vote out there into the blank empty space of the universe.
I mean, I've read if like on the Spelunker video, like when it was remediated last time, like a year ago. I've read the other guys' opinions, and it seemed like half of them were just suggesting to move the map to loved, even though we had like 3 loved captains in the modding thread saying that it's not suitable for that category. So like even if you enforce people to write comments, I don't think they will read all the thread. I think that's not reasonable as an expectation for videos, like in general.
At least, well, for what I usually do, if it's a super long thread and I can't bother to read it, I just go through what's written on the actual mediation post on the BN site and maybe like the mapper's first response. I would hope that at least those 2 bits of information would be enough. If I'm not reading the entire thread.
I think people don't really look outside of the actual veto reasons themselves because they're not really told to. It's just like look at these few arguments and see if you agree with them. That's kind of the assignment.
I think another problem is that on the wiki page for VN expectations, there's literally nothing that like expects VNs to be to engage with the vetoes. And currently there's literally no rule, no guideline, no nothing that either forces or like sets a certain expectation on VNs when it comes to mediation and vetoes. And I think it's mainly a problem when it comes down to enforcing it, because there's literally nothing that we can go by.
And chat's over here running off about discussing about like not going in depth or how that changed when I went to all mode. Well, moderating what 11 people write versus 100 people is a lot different. And the expectation of writing has gone down a little bit because it's less that these people are contributing their own mods and opinions to the veto, more of just a general temperature check on who agrees with it or not. Because reading 100 people's feedbacks that say the same thing if it's lengthy would be even more overwhelming than it could be now.
So what's the general consensus on having people write comments currently? So we want to force it so they at least have to make some sort of effort to look at the map right, but we're not going to be super strict on making them do basically a mod of the map. Have I got that right, or am I just making things up?
Yeah, that sounds fair.
And how do we go about enforcing like a minimum number of voters? Because I think for the most part we're getting decent numbers already, and if we're not getting enough, we just give a ping, right?
Yeah, and they're already working on developing like automated reminders. Like when the say goodbye veto was running, I was sending out manual reminders. But for some of the other vetoes, that wasn't happening because I wasn't running it, watching the mediation and making sure people voted. So having automated reminders from the NAT site will help a bit so that they don't like click the notification away and forget all about it.
Yep, fair. Do we need any numbers for what should be the minimum number of voters?
Just throwing a number out there, guys. Give me an upvote or downvote if you hate it or like it. I would actually say like at least 60% should participate, just so it doesn't feel like, oh, half of half agree with this, but what if more people voted, you know?
A lot of people in the chat are saying 50 and 50 to 60%.
Mm-hmm.
Half of 70%, so you mean 35%? What do you mean by that? People are saying, yeah, people are just saying 50 and 60.
Yeah.
An issue then might be that it just will not reach that threshold no matter what, and it'll be a pending veto for ages. So what would we do about that?
We just have to, I don't know, make them do it. Force them at gunpoint. I don't know.
would there be like a max, like an actual deadline for it? Say but it's like much longer. So is it like 3-4 weeks maybe?
3-4 weeks sounds like a long time though. Usually we want to do it within like a
it's
month,
like
a
a
week. Sorry, right?
now. Yeah. But like if we're removing the deadline for it, like there would still have to be a deadline, I think, or it would just sometimes it would just go on forever.
I think we could test whether the reminders and everything work. And if they don't, and something gets stuck, then we would have to hold an emergency meeting, which I think would be good because we figure it out if it actually happens.
Yeah, it's probably just a crossed up bridge when it comes to it, because I don't think having one veto go overland means it's going to be the end of the world, but I think we can probably address it quickly if it needs to be. There's also a poll running in the text chat in the meetings channel for what percentage we want, if we want to quickly vote on that one, just so we can see what people want.
How many BNs
Yeah,
are in like
70%
standard?
participation is a little is really high.
Like how many BNs are in standard actually?
100,
Plus,
a little over.
Should it be mode specific? Because like smaller game modes may get funny numbers out of 60% win. I'm not sure if that's a problem though.
How about 60% around to the nearest odd number? Actually, the next odd number.
Okay.
So there isn't like a true stalemate.
So what, 60% of voters, and then you're going to have to explain that one to me.
Like if 60% of voters is 12, for example, if 60% of voters is 12 BNs, then like we do +1 to make it 13, so it's an odd number, so there isn't a true stalemate 50-50%.
Right. But what if we... So when we reach the minimum number of voters, do we want to like end it immediately, or do we want to like keep it open for like, let's say, the rest of the week?
Definitely, until the rest of the week. Because we always want more participation. So like when the deadline passes, it will check for participation and see if like the threshold is met. And if not, it'll extend it by a day or something with reminders.
Yeah, I'm just going to check the... Hold on, where's that spreadsheet? Which ones haven't met? So I think for the most part we are meeting the around 60%. Some of them could be like bumped up very slightly. There's this one is 58. We just need about like 2 more-ish, 2-3 more-ish. So I think 60% is very achievable.
Yeah, with the reminders, yes.
All right, so I'll put 60% down since that's what most people seem to be voting for. So 6% as the voter threshold for that we need a minimum of before we close the vetoes.
Yeah.
Once we reach that number, we either carry on for the rest of the week, ideally. And for the old vetoes, once we go through, if we were to increase the threshold, we will reopen the old vetoes and allow people to either add new ones or amend their old ones. So are we definitely going ahead with increasing the threshold then?
Yep.
Wait, I just noticed one potential issue with reopening the veto mediations instead of remediating, which is people who have left BN, like they won't be able to edit their votes, and new BNs won't be able to add in their votes.
We wanted to allow new BNs to do so, right? Because why not?
Yeah, we would want to allow new BNs. We would want to remove old BNs.
Yeah, in that case, it would be better to just do a remediation.
Is there any way to copy over the existing votes that are still valid? Because some people that voted the first time might be like, I don't care enough anymore, even if they would still have the same opinion.
Maybe I gotta check with Bishi if it's actually doable via database edit or something.
Okay, if it's not possible, then we'll just remediate it instantly, but ideally, like a copy paste would be nice.
Yeah. Okay, I'll check with Bishi then.
Okay, so do we need to do anything different for the other modes, or do we just do everything the same for all the modes? I don't know if we need anything more specific. I don't think we do.
There's no. Do you mean like for the threshold for the uphold or for the threshold for minimum participation?
Both, just like anything we discussed today.
I think for now we can just roll with like general changes, and if we find that certain changes affect modes negatively, we can just like hot fix things. I think it's important to get the actual systems in place first.
Yep, fair enough.
I agree.
Okay, so there's a link here for community voting on vetoes, and let me just check what this is. Okay, so this is just mostly allowing the public and not just BNs to vote on vetoes.
Yep. There were a couple ideas flying around that, well, a few, and some points to discuss. Something like whether the community, well, whether it's expected from users to meet certain requirements in order to be able to vote. People suggested either Kudosu accounts or rank maps, to put an example. And whether the voting should be held in a cascading fashion like content review does, or it should be held in a weighted fashion. That's basically the summary of the post and discussion seen so far.
Okay, I'm just trying to see if there's something that we want to look to do immediately, or if it's favourable. Do people like the idea of allowing the general public to do vetoes?
No, I don't think the suggestion was to do vetoes themselves, but rather participate in the discussion. I think those are very different things.
I got a request to speak from SuperView.
I'm really sorry for bothering again, but as I would like to talk about something you guys mentioned just now, where previously removed BNs, are they allowed to vote or not? As a person who was unfortunately removed from BN due to circumstances, I personally believe that if a BN is removed, I feel like if veto remediation were to be done, I feel like that we should use the current set of BNs instead of allowing the previous users to participate in remediation or allow previous users to edit their posts. Because I feel that, yeah, by the time we edit our post, we are already far gone from the BNG.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're gonna do, yes.
Cause like even then, I would assume for the previous two vetoes there would be only one or two blokes that are gone from BNG. As for Spelunker, I'm not really sure, but that's what I feel.
Yeah, what you said aligns with what we plan to do.
Wasn't there a
So
case
thank you for
where
sharing.
the original video I wanted to walk off and the video was like not BN anymore and the video itself was like 3 years ago or whatever?
Yeah, that's Super Driver
Oh,
or something. No, wait, no, it's not. It was a different one. Which one? I
I
think that was.
don't remember what it was, but I feel like at
Oh,
that
I
point we
can't
should
keep these straight. I
uphold
should
it.
have added more notes.
But
Okay,
with like
so
two requests to speak.
I mean we'll do them in order, yes. So here's NAT.
Hey. Yes, I'm a bit nervous, but yes. As for the proposal, yes, I can see why people might be opposed to like unranked mappers or like people who don't know much about mapping voting, that like they might be influenced too easily by big figures like Sotarks and whoever else. I don't really follow that at the moment. But I also think that it would cause serious problems if they're just not represented, because that would result in populist figures, to put it that way, that would only make people more angry because it would just feel like there is still a bar there. So as a compromise, I think there should be like a 50-50 system where like half of the people that meet the bar for like either ranked maps or Kadosu, it shouldn't be that high a bar, but like qualified modders or mappers should have half of the vote, and then up to half should be just general players, so they at least get a voice. And we know what the stance of the general player base is on the issue, so that they're heard at all. But yes, I do agree with what Ryax said in the community voice and vetoes thread, that yes, that the content review system could work, but I haven't thought it through 100% yet, but the content review cascading system could work just fine, with NAT and BN being the first 70% and then the player base being the tiebreaker, like with actual content review. Yes?
Yeah, I think I do remember that one being brought up. The only small issue I can see with having like a cascading system is, are people going to be able to understand? It's like a relatively complex system where we do like, oh, do if this then this, if this then this. Like it can work.
Like the main concern people had was like if it would increase the value of like brigading, if people generally agree with it, why are they coming to the vote? Which I think would be resolved by looking at how we share vetoes, but I don't have any ideas for that because like unless you're keeping your pulse on things, how do you know a veto happened? Well, if there's a big drama about it, and if there's a big drama about it, you're going to listen to the most popular people's opinions about it, which is fair, but there needs to be a way for just anyone to know about any veto. But Bite You Death mentions in the chat maybe just testing out new veto thresholds before changing it further. A step-by-step change like that could be good. I think we just need to keep careful track of when we change things, just so it's easier to look back at later. Like, why is this veto upheld? Why is this one dismissed? They have the same number of votes, or however that worked out.
I think what we could do is, because I think there's concerns with how there's this huge difference in mindset between like actual mappers and BNs versus the general public, and that was evidenced by that forum poll we had a while ago about that one map. I can't remember which one it was now, on that Sotox map, where in general the general public voted a lot differently compared to BNs and NATs and mappers and such. But what I think could be useful is just having the data anyway, so we could just have the official vote be BNs and NATs on the vetoes, but we can also allow the general public to vote them in anyway, and they won't be counted towards the official thing, but it may be nice to see that data anyway, just to have it. But I don't know how popular... If people aren't going to vote on it, I don't know how useful that data will be. It isn't, it's just an option. It's just a random idea I had.
1K random users.
Well, yes, I do think a cascading system, the benefit of a cascading system would be, it would, if nothing else, be at least just as good as just having the public's opinion on it, because this takes in the public opinion on it as a tiebreaker. Hence, if there's brigading, then the ranked mappers will generally be able to suppress a majority of the influence because of the majority that they have, but players aren't not given a voice at all either, as I said.
Honestly, yeah, cascading was my favorite idea too. I even wrote it in my vote for the threshold change. The only thing is that the condition for it would be that it would go in both directions. So either the BNs and NAT 70% agree on something, whichever direction that might be, and if they don't, then community voice 50-50 tiebreaker kind of deal.
50-50. I mean, yeah, 50-50 is pretty good for community actually, because 70% I realize is actually a pretty high bar to get a community to agree with something when there's brigading. 30% to disagree is a pretty easy standard to get if you have big influence.
I mean, the main problem is if you're using it as a tiebreaker and there's still like an unclear result, then what happens? Is it just stuck?
What do you mean an unclear result?
If we required 70% in both directions to have a conclusion, and the same thing was required for when it goes to community vote, then stuff stuck in between and closer
No,
to
but
50%
like
would just be stuck.
just like in content review, if it's less than 70%, it fails. If it's like the community vote is less than 70%. If it's in the middle, it doesn't get stuck. It just fails. Like if the community vote is in the middle, then it just doesn't get stuck. It just fails because the veto is denied because the vote percentage isn't reached. I don't know if I'm too eloquent here, but like if there's 65% say from BN and NAT and
Yeah,
like
I'm following
45 from players, then it's not going to get stuck because the players have voiced their disagreement. Say 35% for more clarity. If 65% of BN and NAT like agree with a veto, but only 35%, it's not going to get stuck because it's not 70% either way. It's going to fail, just like in content review, because the players have made it clear that a lot of them, most of them even don't agree with it. Of course, there shouldn't be. What I'm reading in the chat is there should be like the community also goes 50%, then it's just stuck. But no, I'm trying to say that there shouldn't be like a turnout requirement for the community because it's not really a good thing to enforce. You can't enforce a turnout requirement on an entire community. As we've seen, you can barely enforce that on people. About voting. Oh.
Yeah.
Yes. I wasn't very clear over that, sorry.
Yeah, I think the point is made though.
No, I was saying I don't want the community vote to go to 70 because then stuff between 30 and 70 would be stuck forever. Basically, BN, NAT, 70%. If no 70%, then community. And community, 50% to pass or fail. Just like putting that in when we haven't made up our minds by ourselves. Now, but for that kind of proposal, some of that does depend on how doable that is web dev-wise, and I have no clue.
Okay, so gonna run through a quick scenario. Let's say veto mediation ends and the BNs and the NADs have 69% of the BNs voted to uphold. So in that case, it's less than 70%, and so it would fail on the BN side, right? And in that case, it would go to a community vote.
Yep.
And let's say the community says 51% of the community says it should be upheld. Then that's the tie broken, so it will be upheld officially.
Yep.
Okay. Do we want to go ahead with the community voting thing? I'm not sure if I saw consensus whether people wanted this favorably or not.
Thoughts on formally formalizing, like posting it in the beatmap management subforum to get some like concrete answers on it there.
So you think we should let this discussion happen on the forums for a bit longer?
Yeah. Also to give it more exposure and more time in general.
We could do. We do have a thread
That
open already,
said-
so.
Yeah, that said, can we still go ahead and run the remediations for the current 50 to 70% vetoes that are kind of in limbo right now?
I think
We can do that soon.
We can go ahead
We
with
can
that.
do. We can work on that soon.
Yeah.
Okay. For like the veto topic, we got one request to speak and one concern from Secretary that he's been trying to ask about like a while ago. So he said, I think it's an option to include both nominating and vetoing BNs inside the actual veto numbers, aka +2 from the actual nominators and -1 from the vetoer. Since we are including every BN right now, might as well also include the 2 nominators and the vetoer inside the veto mediation as vetoes towards resolving the veto. I'm sorry. This won't matter much for large modes, but in Catch's case, a single swing vote could mean a lot.
Sure, why not?
There was once a case where a map I nominated got vetoed, and then I ended up agreeing with the veto. So
Yeah, I don't think it would be automatic that the sides would be decided. Also, can you hear me? If it's working.
Yeah, now we
Yeah.
can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. It wouldn't be automatic for which side is on which. I just would think that it's best that both the vetoers and the nominator, or the vetoer and the nominators, can be included into the veto as well. Because I mean, we're included everybody everyways. So
yeah, I think especially if we open it up to everyone, I don't think it's a bad idea to open it up to the nominations as well. Especially now that because it's not, it didn't used to be. It's no longer the 11 people we used to have, right?
yeah.
Right. So I think overall, I've just written down for now. The action points are we're going to go ahead with increasing the threshold to 70% or more needs to agree on the veto for it to be upheld. And for the most recent vetoes, we're going to reopen those ones, carry over the old votes if we can, and then allow people to either amend or update or add new votes to their veto mediation.
Yeah. One last thing, there is one request to speak that's been sitting here for a while. I wanna check on it.
Hello. So
Hi.
I have a question about the first bullet point, deleting vetoes. Over the course of like modding and mapping history, if you look at it, there's a lot of these cycles where it's kind of like, oh, here's this problem, here's this cool way to solve it. Oh, the solution caused more problems? Okay, well, let's reverse the solution, and now the original problem is back. You know, and that's why I personally have a concern about just outright getting rid of vetoes. So, my question, and it's totally fine if this is too big of a question, but would the NAT have any alternative systems in mind to put in place if vetoes were removed?
So the general idea of vetoes is to have some sort of quality assurance. If someone has an issue with a mapping qualified, the vetoes are a way to bring that to the table, right?
I mean, an upheld veto is practically a nuke already. So, like, unless you change the beat map, it can't go for rank in this design. So I'm not really sure we need to bring back nukes, other than like having a funny image.
There was the idea floating around several times where the public can just say, "I don't like this map. I'm going to report it," and report it for nuking. And if it gets a certain amount of reports, then we step in and say, "Okay, we're going to nuke this map." But I think that's had several concerns, which I'd have to dig up what they were. But it also doesn't. It's also not usually exclusive to vetoes either, right?
At least in my head, like an upheld veto is functionally equivalent because you can't really move the map anywhere unless you do the changes in some sort of compromising way, like with the veto reason, right?
Pretty much, yeah. Or you just let it sit there for a year and have it remediated in a year's time.
Well, true, but then you just gotta have a lot of time. I still think it's better to just first go with a proposal that had actual support instead of the one that everyone had a hot take on.
Yeah, I don't think we will be removing vetoes anyway.
I
So.
think deleting the whole shebang should be on the table if we move up this threshold to 70% and like realize that that also doesn't work for XYZ. But I'm not sure like what sort of system we would replace it with.
I mean, the
Isn't
most
just like
likely scenario that I see right now is 70% is pretty high. If you check the veto sheet, a lot of them are like 64%, 69%. There's some that are much, much higher, but the 70% will end up meaning that vetoes are relatively rarely upheld as it is. At least compared to now.
I think that was the general community direction that we wanted to take anyways.
Mhm.
So I think we should first wait and see how that goes, and if it doesn't go well, we change it. I don't know. Like if changing the numbers all we gotta do, then just move it down to 65 or 60 and just move on. But yeah, I think we're first gonna try 70 and then just see what happens.
Yeah, and we have 4 maps, or like 4 or 5, whatever, how many maps there were to test it out with already, so we'll see how it goes. Okay, so we have our action points for the vetoes. Are there any other questions anyone has about vetoes? I know there's a lot of activity on vetoes. Let's see. Alright, it doesn't look like there's any more questions in the chat. I think people are talking about something else. So that's pretty much it for all the agenda topics we had for the start. There's one more point we had that I have at the bottom here. I think was added mid-meeting about another mug event or something along those lines. I think it's something we've generally wanted to do in the past. We've just had not really any ideas how to progress with it. Anyone got any comments about mug event version 2? Or anything, or like something along those lines?
I think doing something with like the keychains that Fiji was recently doing for Mappers Guild would be cool for the BN side of things. Or at least that's just an idea on the reward, not the actual event.
Yeah, the reward could be talked about later, but I'm just thinking about what do we do for an event, because the last time we did, new mappers, right? How many?
Yep. New mappers.
Yeah. And then people brought up concerns about, quality has gone down because it's all new mappers. But what else could we do, and is it worth the compromise in whatever quality we do? Because it's all well and good saying, we should hold another event, but if we don't have any ideas on what to do about it, or what to do for an event, then we're just stuck here being silent in the meeting.
Well, I mean, I think it's been long enough we could just rerun the same one, honestly. It's been like 3 years.
That is also an option,
I would
yeah.
design a different mug, though.
I don't mind it, honestly. If anyone has any suggestions, feel free to leave them in the chat.
Because, like, even if people are concerned about, like, quality going down, this is so many more people that get to engage with ranked for the first time, and it's, like, measured, and we know which BNs are contributing the most to this. Because for some of them, it was, in the last event, it was just continuing what they were already doing, and they were really good at it for the most part. We would have to figure out a way to do it on the technical side, because last time I ran it with Seto, we had like Phoenix set up a program to like go through and check for us, and I had to like manually double check it for like different modes, mappers, and a lot of other things. And I don't know if he even still has that program. It might not even work anymore, so that would be stuff we would have to look at. I do know when we last brought it up internally, there was also ideas like doing it for specific genres that people feel are underrepresented in the game, like ranking more English maps or ranking more metal maps or ranking more insert here kind of maps kind of thing, and just having different themes and genres to go with that.
Yeah, that's generally That's a pretty good idea as well. I'm just thinking. So should I just leave you, Nofi, to think of like organize an event for this? But it doesn't have to be in like immediately, but just like generally take one away and hopefully develop one.
Sure thing, as long as the
Yeah, that's
community
fine.
doesn't explode again in 2 months, because that tends to make me a little bit busy.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll just put down that we're not against not having one. No, I can't speak anymore. We're not against having one. We just need an actual event, and we'll hold one soon. TM.
Hmm.
Okay, so anything else you wanna discuss?
Yep, well, we can open up the floor to just
We
any
got
general question.
a request to speak from. Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
So, one thing that I wanted to ask that wasn't really referenced in this meeting, unfortunately, is probation. I don't want this to be interpreted as a skill issue, but I think it would be pretty cool to lower the threshold for people that are applying for BN, like similar to that of the trial BN system that was introduced roughly a year ago. Yet have the probation more strict so that the people that are objectively not ready aren't actually getting in the group, but they still get the experience to learn from.
I think we discontinued that because it didn't really work out that well as intended.
We discontinued trial, but we did incorporate a compromise of those lower standards into how we do apps, and this was made more obvious when we changed the app system. The main concern people are running into right now is how we handle evaluating probation BNs, because standard, we don't take map quality into account as much right now if it's not brought up and qualified or disqualified. And this is an issue for probation VNs because we could say we would be strict all we want, but what are we actually checking? So this does make some NAT more cautious about who we add to BN, because how are we going to have that balance if we say we're not going to check that kind of thing? That's been a pretty big topic of its own, but I don't know if most of the people most motivated on that topic are here today because it wasn't in our original agenda.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask because it's not really referenced a lot around here, and I just wanted to know people's opinions on that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, just generally speaking, it's pretty common knowledge. It's pretty much common knowledge that people learn better when they get to have the experience of being a BM rather than just modding random maps. So I think that could help with like recruiting people and letting close applicants improve while also keeping the quote unquote bar existent. Uh, but yeah, what you have voiced as a fair concern.
Yeah, the main thing is that we consciously try to not like take the subjective stuff into consideration. So like once you add someone, you kind of like if they don't technically screw up, then they just stay in kind of. So that's what's making a bunch of people more cautious with like who they add to begin with.
Mhm. Yeah, all right, that's fair. That's pretty much all I wanted to ask. Thank you.
Okay, so you can do a couple more invites, I think. You got Super V with another request. Hello?
Hello. I'm sorry if I'm being kind of annoying for the third question, but there's something I'd like to ask about the BN app. So like from what I'm seeing in the public evaluation archives, there are essentially more than one way to like get. There's more like one different way to app essentially into BN, right? But from what I'm seeing, like the evaluations are handled in like a different way on uh on at least on an individual feedback basis. I have generally seen mostly I have sometimes seen mostly like conflicting feedback. Like one person says A, but the other person says A is fine, but the other person says A is not fine, and something like that. And essentially, in some BN apps, I also noticed that certain evaluators have certain tendencies. Like one evaluator would say that this particular timing isn't that great, or for example, this one particular evaluator thinks that like, oh yeah, this particular map is invalid or something. The thing I'd like to ask is that is there a particular standardization process for the individual evaluating system, or will the differences in the individual evaluating system will be like talked about and discussed together in the group evaluation session? First would be, let's put it there first.
That's part of the point of having multiple evaluators is you do get different opinions on how you're doing, and then the result is based off of what do they come to a consensus on. The group stage, we do our best to edit anything conflicting out so that the applicant has something clear to improve on. I can't say we always get everything. You can always ask questions if it's confusing.
All right, thank you very well. And oh yeah, there's something else that I see in the meetings. Oh yeah, and there's something else since Basin mentioned it. So I also noticed like there are a lot of neutral apps. There's like lots of neutrals in the individual evaluations, but like even if three people voted neutral, even if three people voted neutral, or like three people, or if there's one agree, one neutral, one disagree, like the evaluation outcome will be wildly different. And yeah, seems like the apps with equal individual consensus have different final results, which seems to be decided by evaluators' opinions. I'm just saying what Basin said. If
Yeah,
I'm
because if
confusing,
we can't
oh,
come to an agreement right away, that's what the group stage is for. Um, Normally we'll like discuss it a bit and we'll edit the additional feedback and the individual feedbacks to better reflect why the consensus is the way it is. And it's not like somebody that has strengths is necessarily ready for BN, but it's also not necessarily like somebody that missed something is like a totally bad modder or anything either. And this is a lot of those areas where there is that gray zone because it is opinionated.
It's also worth to keep in mind that the individual stage isn't the final evaluation of the applicant. It's mostly just like it's only the first step of the evaluations process. We started displaying them in the evaluation because people thought that the individual comments would be useful to them, but just keep in mind they're not actually the final outcome of the evaluation, especially if it's all neutrals and such. That's why we have group stage and we have people communicating with each other about that.
all right. Yes, I inherently understand that there are different strengths, different weaknesses in certain modders. Like each modder isn't exactly the same, but uh, I would like to offer two perspectives. Maybe like the first perspective is that I believe that if there's three neutrals, like apps with three neutrals or like 1-1-1 should ideally have the same result. That's probably the first thing I'd like to say. Like some form of consistency would be nice to not essentially look like a mess from the outside. And the second perspective I would like to offer is that a lot of people essentially like a lot of people like being BN is something that us community members think is something of a privileged spot, right? It would be rather demotivating to see your app, for example, having 1-1-1 getting failed, but like this other guy that has an app of 1-1-1 getting passed essentially. Or say like an app that has three neutrals gets failed and then a lot of other three neutrals passed. It would be pretty
Honestly,
demotivating.
at that
But yeah, I
point,
would like to know your opinions.
I would actually think that we shouldn't show what the individual votes were because I feel like it sounds like you guys are getting distracted by that because what matters is the final feedback and the final result. Because the individual votes are not the final feedback, they are not the final results. And a lot of things can come up during group stage that can swing things one way or another or really give that final consensus.
It's not something
Alright.
we can just quantify into a numbers game, honestly. because all applications are different. They all have their own intricacies, their own quirks, etc. You can't just like boil it down to like one pass, two neutral equal pass, or like that kind of logic. You have to go in depth into what was mentioned in the final feedback, because every applicant and every application is different.
All right. I understand your sentiment. Like one of the suggestions in the meetings is that no, like wait, hold up. Right. I understand your sentiment. I also believe that like the feedback is more important. But as it stands, I believe that like even if you said like the community is misfocusing on the votes, I feel like yeah, most people misfocus on the votes. And yes, I understand your sentiment. I hope you guys can give my view. Uh, I hope you guys can reconsider my view. But one of the guys in the comments said to make it a toggle, like the votes a toggle. If you guys would be able to do that, something like that, yeah. And thank you.
I think we can probably entertain this idea and look into it more carefully internally and see what would be the best way to proceed forward with this. Okay, so I think we can do a couple of requests for coin grabs because. So does anyone else have any questions in general? Okay, guys, before meeting ends, I would like to present the fact that if NAT news never made it to Reddit post, no one would ever know about it. So to keep this in mind before you guys get into community mediation. Okay, so you're suggesting that we also like try to reach out to announce things to Reddit.
NAT
Like
Reddit, let's go.
I mean, we already have like an NAT Reddit account that we used like one time for a Q&A. So I guess we can just use that alongside our like NAT Twitter and like the
Was it
BN
not-
site announcements.
Was it not a news post on the front page of our website when we did our
Yeah,
NAT?
we do occasional news posts.
I would imagine more people look at a news post than they do at Reddit, right?
Each one has their own different audience.
I think they're more referring to like general BN site announcements rather than the latest NAT Gazette. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, some people have been taking it into their own hands to repost the BN site announcements to Reddit. Just do it ourselves, but that's all.
You know, we can start if you
Although, in
want
terms
to.
of the Reddit, we would probably have to ask the mods because I'm not entirely sure whether that really feels on topic.
Thing is, I've seen a bunch of like NAT announcement cross posts to Reddit, and they have been getting decent traction sometimes. So I don't think that it would be like a general issue if we start doing that. We can ask the mods regardless.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's all for questions, right? Pretty much.
Anyone else? Maybe you can slip in something during the last 3 minutes. So we hit the 2-hour mark.
Alright, I think we'll call it there then. So we have action points on modding documentation. The BN mentorship is in the works. We also need documentation for that one as well. So a lot of documentation being written, and finally we've got some action points for vetoes. We've got some changes on the way for those. Alright, I think we can call this officially over then. Thanks for coming, everyone. Thanks for listening in as well. If you have any opinions on how we're doing this publicly, then feel free to leave comments about that as well. Alright, thanks guys.
Thanks for everybody that came today. I hope y'all have a great afternoon, night, morning, whatever time zone you're in. We'll see you all again next time. Ciao.
Bye.